was the summer of my 12th year, an age where the mind begins to comprehend danger, but still lingers in the innocence of childhood. I wasn't a stranger to the shadows of our neighborhood. The block we lived on was a quiet, forgotten place, nestled at the edge of the hollow forest, a sprawling expanse of woods that seemed to hold secrets in its gnarled trees and shadowed trails. Our house was near the end of a dead-end road, close to a dilapidated, overgrown sump where the world seemed to end and silence took over. On the other side of that forgotten world was an abandoned park, old and neglected, with its rusted swings creaking in the wind like ghosts of another time. One particular evening, the scent of something strange lingered in the air, a mixture of damp earth and sugar, like carnival food that had long been forgotten. A traveling carnival had set up in the park just beyond the woods, and though I hadn't planned on going, my mother, who rarely restricted me, suggested I check it out. She wasn't the overbearing type, never warning me of dangers. I had the freedom to roam, and I relished it, though my unease about the place had always lingered. That night, I decided to walk through the woods with only the dim beam of a flashlight to guide me. The trees seemed to close in as I walked, their twisted branches like skeletal hands reaching out. The air grew colder the deeper I ventured, and the faint smell of decay lingered in the damp night. But my curiosity drove me forward, the thought of the carnival rides flashing in my mind. As I passed through the broken fence that led to the park, I was hit by the sight of flickering lights. There was a Ferris wheel that turned lazily, the lights casting strange shadows. The carousel creaked on its rusted track, and the carnival games stood deserted, their prizes locked away in dark booths. The air was thick with the remnants of laughter and distant music, but the crowd was sparse, as if something kept people away. Still, I pushed forward, not noticing the unease beginning to settle in my chest. In the center of the park stood a large, red and white striped tent, its fabric fluttering in the wind like the rotting skin of some forgotten creature. I caught sight of a few people entering and, unable to resist, decided to peer inside. The tent was dimly lit, and the stale scent of popcorn and old sweat filled the air. 4 rows of scattered seats were occupied by an odd collection of people, some with vacant eyes, others smiling too wide, as though they were lost in something I couldn't see. On stage, 3 clowns performed, one riding a tricycle, another juggling flaming pins, and the last, a tall figure with unsettlingly long limbs, dancing awkwardly around them. But it was the tall clown that noticed me first. His eyes met mine through the shadows, and in a sudden, jerking motion, he bounded over to me, his painted face a grotesque mask of cheer. His finger was raised, beckoning me closer with a playful, sinister smile. "Come closer," he whispered, his voice like gravel scraping over bone. I froze, heart hammering in my chest. A sick sensation crawled up my spine. He was too close, too eager. I didn't know why, but instinct told me to run. I backed away, shaking my head, and turned toward the exit. But my mind wouldn't shake the image of that clown's eyes, staring after me with a terrible knowing. I walked through the carnival with more urgency, finding a friend at one of the game booths. I talked to him for a while, but it was clear my thoughts were elsewhere. When the carnival began to close, I said my goodbyes, my stomach twisting with unease. The woods, dark and thick, loomed ahead. The air seemed heavier now, as if something watched me from behind every tree, every shadow. As I approached the edge of the park, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, dragging along the ground. It was him, the clown. "Hey, kid," the voice came, low and raspy, like something dragged from the depths of a nightmare. "You want to see something special? The backstage area's got things you can't imagine. Things they don't show the audience." My heart skipped. I didn't answer. I didn't want to look back, but his voice, a whisper now, like a caress, followed me through the dark. Don't go just yet. I quickened my pace, walking faster until my legs burned. The clown's voice seemed to trail me, getting closer with every step, but when I risked a glance behind me, there was only darkness. I didn't stop until the park was a distant memory. I thought I was safe, but I was wrong. The sound of crunching leaves reached my ears as I walked further into the woods, each step heavier than the last. The flashlight in my hand flickered erratically, casting warped shadows across the path. I felt it. Someone was behind me. When I turned, there he was. The clown. His face was still painted in that unsettling smile, his eyes wide and unblinking. He stood in the darkness just beyond the reach of my light. "I thought I'd walk you home, kid," he said with that same raspy voice, his smile growing even wider. My heart stopped. My blood turned to ice. I ran. Branches slapped my face, but I didn't feel it. My legs screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. The flashlight slipped from my hand and bounced across the ground, its beam flickering as I sprinted blindly toward the safety of my house. The clown's footsteps echoed behind me, slow and deliberate, but I dared not look back. It wasn't until I saw the streetlight ahead, flickering on, that I dared glance behind me. The clown had stopped. He stood just beyond the edge of the trees, his figure barely visible, but his eyes, those eyes, they glowed in the dark like twin embers. When I reached my front door, I slammed it shut and bolted the locks, breathing heavily, my chest tight with fear. My mother looked up from her book, concerned. I didn't say a word. The nightmare didn't end there. That night, I heard a sound, soft, a tapping at my bedroom window. My heart raced, my throat tight with panic. I dared not move. I stayed as still as possible, holding my breath, waiting for whatever was outside to go away. It didn't. The tapping continued, slow and methodical, like the clown's footsteps. It wasn't until the morning that I dared look. There, at the bottom of the window, was a single orange shoelace. I never thought I'd be afraid of clowns. Sure, I'd seen them in movies and at parties, but nothing prepared me for what happened that night. The night that scarred me and would forever change how I looked at the world. It all started when I was 14, and I was alone in the house. My parents were on a business trip, and my siblings were out. My friend, who I'll call Elle, was the only one left who could distract me from the gnawing silence of the house. He was always up for a walk, so we decided to head out into the dark, empty streets of our neighborhood. That night, the air was thick, the kind of heavy stillness that makes your skin crawl. The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. We didn't talk much, just walked side by side, our feet crunching on the fallen leaves as we headed for the local carnival, which had set up in the parking lot of an abandoned shopping center. The carnival itself was eerie. No music played, and the lights flickered intermittently. There were no cheers, no laughter, just the occasional clink of coins and the sounds of hollow wooden booths. But we didn't think much of it. It was just a carnival, right? The first strange thing was the clown. I was busy tossing a ring onto a bottle when Elle nudged me and pointed. A man in full clown makeup stood at the edge of the fairgrounds, motionless. His face was pale, his lips twisted into an unnatural grin that didn't reach his eyes. He wasn't juggling or throwing balloons like the other performers. He just stared at us. Something in the air shifted. My gut twisted. Elle laughed nervously. Is he looking at us? I looked over at him again, and it felt as though he had moved slightly, just enough to notice. But his expression remained the same. He wasn't performing. He was watching. And that smile, God, that smile, it didn't feel right. It was too wide, too rigid, as if his skin had been stretched to fit a grotesque mask. We kept walking, trying to ignore it, but we could still feel his eyes on our backs. The carnival seemed to blur, the rides and games flickering in and out of focus, distorted by the weight of that watchful gaze. "I don't like this, Elle," I said, voice trembling as we stepped away from the fairground. "Let's go home, man," Elle muttered, quickening his pace. We were almost back to my street when I heard it, a soft, shuffling sound behind us. The faintest of footsteps, just enough to make my heart skip a beat. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. "Did you hear that?" I asked Elle, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond immediately. Then, "Yeah, man. Let's just get back to your place." We kept walking, but the footsteps didn't stop. It wasn't a rhythmic, casual pace. It was slow, deliberate, as though someone, or something, was mimicking our movements. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. The street lamps overhead flickered out one by one, plunging us into darkness for a few seconds at a time. The only light came from the weak glow of our phone screens, but it barely lit the road in front of us. Then we both froze. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the bushes across the street. A silhouette. I turned my head slowly, barely daring to breathe. It was him, the clown. He was crouched behind a bush, his head tilted unnaturally, eyes locked on us, that sickening smile still plastered to his face. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know if I should scream, run, or something else. I just stood there, paralyzed. Elle muttered, "We have to go. Now." His voice cracked with panic. I fumbled with my keys, my fingers trembling as I tried to find the right one. My mind raced, but all I could think was, we can't outrun him. The air felt thick, suffocating, and the streets around us seemed to stretch farther than they had before. My breath came in shallow gasps. Elle nudged me. "Turn around." I looked up, and my stomach dropped. The clown was no longer hidden in the bushes. He was walking toward us. The streetlights blinked out one last time, plunging us into darkness. All that was left was the sound of his shoes scraping against the pavement, slow and deliberate. I finally shoved the door open, and we rushed inside, slamming it behind us. I could still hear his footsteps outside, getting closer. I immediately called my parents, but all I heard was the sound of my own breathing, rapid and harsh. They told me to stay upstairs, arm myself, and lock the doors. I didn't have a gun, but I grabbed the only thing I could find, an old baseball bat. We ran upstairs and barricaded ourselves in my little brother's room, looking out the window. There he was. The clown stood in the middle of the driveway, facing the house. He didn't move, but his head slowly turned upward, toward our window. It felt as though he could see right through the glass, his cold, empty eyes staring directly into mine. He smiled wider, if that was even possible. My heart hammered in my chest, and I slammed the blinds shut, falling back onto the floor. We crouched together, barely able to breathe. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Then, without warning, he was gone. The sound of his steps faded into the night. I don't know if he left for good, or if he was just waiting. The night passed in a blur of nervous glances and sweaty palms. The next morning, I went downstairs and checked the front door. Everything looked normal. But when I opened the door to step outside, I froze. There, on the doorstep, was a single red balloon. No string, no note, just a balloon. It swayed slightly in the wind, its color so bright it hurt to look at. I stepped back inside, heart pounding. I never saw the clown again, but I felt him, always, watching, waiting. And I learned that sometimes the real terror doesn't show up until you start to forget it. The clown's face is burned into my memory. Every night it grins at me from the edge of the dark. I know it's not over, not by a long shot. You may have heard the rumors, whispers creeping through the town, of clowns stalking the night and luring children into the woods. It started as an unsettling story, a mere cautionary tale from the local legends. But for me, it became a nightmare so real it still haunts me, one that I wish I could forget, but will never be able to. I'm only 14 years old, and I live in a small, isolated town in the middle of nowhere. My family doesn't talk much, and the people here mind their own business. It's quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me. In fact, sometimes it's so quiet that you can almost hear the trees themselves breathing. It's the kind of place where the mundane becomes unsettling. Everyone knows everyone, and the air is thick with things unsaid. My summer job had me working long hours in the lumberyard. The pay wasn't great, but it kept me busy, and it was easy work, hauling heavy lumber, helping customers load up their cars. My house was just a mile from the yard, and walking home each evening gave me time to clear my head. But one night, my walk turned into a hellish experience that I'll never escape. It was around 9:30 p.m. when I left work that night. The moon had just begun to illuminate the winding road, casting long shadows over the fields that stretched out on either side. The trees towered over me, their branches like skeletal hands reaching for the heavens. The town was far behind me, nothing but darkness ahead. Normally, I wouldn't mind the walk. The path is secluded and peaceful, with just the croak of the frogs and the chirping of the crickets filling the air. I had my earbuds in, listening to music as I trudged along, letting the sounds carry me home. But as I passed a particularly dense part of the woods, something snapped me out of my trance, a high-pitched laugh, the kind that makes your blood run cold. I yanked out my earbuds and stood still in the middle of the road, my heart hammering in my chest. My breath caught in my throat. The laugh had been loud and sudden, echoing through the night, like it came from the very trees themselves. I scanned the darkness, waiting for it to happen again. But there was nothing. Just the rustling of leaves and the faint sound of crickets. I convinced myself it was just the wind playing tricks, so I continued my walk, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. But the sense of unease never left me. The whole walk felt wrong, as if something was lurking just out of sight. When I reached my street, I thought I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. A figure, a shadow, standing in the distance. I froze. The figure was too tall to be an animal, and it stood unnervingly still. For a second, I thought it was a deer, but as I walked closer, I realized it wasn't a deer at all. No, this wasn't something from the forest. This was something far worse. I was about 100 feet away when it moved, darting into the woods with unnatural speed. My stomach twisted, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. But I couldn't let myself be scared. Not yet. Maybe it was just someone out for a walk. I kept moving forward. My house was just a quarter of a mile away, and I was nearly there. But then I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps following me. It wasn't an animal. These were heavy, deliberate steps. I looked over my shoulder, and that's when I saw him. A clown, standing in the middle of the road. His bright, mismatched costume was filthy, stained beyond recognition. His makeup was smudged, streaks of black running down his face like oil. And his eyes were empty, black voids that sucked in all the light around them. "You have something of mine," he said, his voice low and smooth, almost too calm. The clown's smile stretched wider, his lips cracking with the effort. He sounded almost pleased. "I need it back." I froze. The only thing I had was the stupid red clown nose I'd found earlier in the day. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what he meant. My heart raced as I tried to back away slowly, my mind screaming for me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The clown stepped closer, his hands behind his back. "You've got it, don't you?" he asked again, voice rising with a sudden edge. His grin grew wider. "Give me my nose and no harm will come to you." I stood motionless, barely able to breathe. My thoughts were racing. What was he talking about? This couldn't be real. This had to be some sick joke. But then he pulled something from behind his back. It wasn't a nose. It wasn't a toy. It was a machete, long, sharp, and glinting in the pale moonlight. "I don't have your nose," I stammered, my voice cracking, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Then I'll take yours," the clown said, his voice dripping with malice. He raised the machete, and before I knew what was happening, he lunged at me. I turned and ran. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I could hear his footsteps behind me growing louder, heavier, his breath ragged as he chased me down the road. His laughter echoed in my mind, filling me with dread, with the bone-chilling terror of being pursued by something that should never have existed. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning with each desperate breath. My heart was a jackhammer in my chest, my legs screaming with exhaustion, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I knew it would be over. And just when I thought I couldn't run any further, I saw headlights cresting the hill. A truck. I screamed, waving my arms wildly. The clown froze, his eyes narrowing as the truck barreled toward us. And just like that, the truck screeched to a halt, and the clown disappeared into the woods. The driver called the police. I don't remember much after that, just being in the back of the truck, shaken, unable to comprehend what had just happened. I never made that walk again. But the clowns didn't stop. I heard reports from others, more clowns, more kids disappearing into the woods, lured by the grotesque figures with smiles too wide, eyes too empty. I don't know who they are, what they want, or how they get away with it. But I do know this. I'm not the only one who's seen them. And now, I don't just fear clowns. I fear what they're hiding in the woods.